Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a gangster. He was Harlem's king in a city where power was everything, and fear was the currency. He was one of New York City's most notorious crime bosses, Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson, often called the Harlem Godfather. For over 30 years, Bumpy ruled Harlem with an iron fist, becoming both a feared gangster and a beloved figure in the community. His story is one of violence, power, and a deep connection to Harlem's black community. Join us as we dive into Bumpy Johnson's life, from his early years to his rise as Harlem's top crime boss, his celebrity connections, and the lasting legacy he left behind. Early life of Bumpy Johnson. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson was born on October 31st, 1905, in Charleston, South Carolina. Due to a small bump on his head, he was nicknamed Bumpy by those around him, and the name stuck for life. Bumpy's early years were challenging, especially in the racially tense South. When Bumpy was just 10 years old, his brother William was accused of killing a white man. Fearing retaliation, Bumpy's parents moved the family to Harlem, a thriving hub for African Americans in New York City. Despite the fresh start, life in Harlem wasn't easy. Bumpy, with his southern accent and small stature, was often picked on by the local kids. But instead of backing down, he fought back, quickly earning a reputation as someone who wouldn't be bullied. This toughness set the stage for his future in the world of crime. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Entering the world of crime, Bumpy dropped out of high school early, and like many kids in Harlem, he hustled to make money. He sold newspapers, swept streets, and hustled pool. But it was his encounter with a local gangster named William "Bub" Hewlett that would change his life forever. Bub admired Bumpy's courage and offered him a job providing protection to the neighborhood's numbers runners, people who ran illegal lotteries in Harlem. It wasn't long before Bumpy Johnson's name became known throughout Harlem as a tough enforcer and a reliable protector. Meeting Stephanie St. Clair. In the 1930s, Bumpy met Stephanie St. Clair, also known as Madam Queen, a powerful woman who ran one of the most successful numbers games in Harlem. At the time, the numbers racket was incredibly lucrative, but it was also dangerous, as different gangs vied for control. Madam St. Clair, impressed by Bumpy's intelligence and toughness, hired him as her bodyguard and top enforcer. Bumpy and Madam St. Clair quickly became close allies. She trusted him, and together they fought off rival gangsters, including Dutch Schultz, a notorious mobster who wanted control of the Harlem numbers game. Bumpy led what could be described as a guerrilla war against Schultz's men, and by the end of the conflict, many of Schultz's people had either been killed or driven out of Harlem. This established Bumpy as a major figure in Harlem's underworld, making a deal with the Mafia. Despite his war against Schultz, Bumpy was not interested in endless violence. After Dutch Schultz was killed by the Italian Mafia, Bumpy struck a deal with Lucky Luciano, the powerful head of the Italian Mafia in New York. The deal allowed Harlem's black crime organizations to retain control of the numbers game in exchange for a percentage of their profits going to the Italian mob. This was a groundbreaking arrangement at the time, as it was one of the few instances in which a black crime boss successfully negotiated with the Italian Mafia on equal terms. This deal earned Bumpy respect in Harlem and beyond, as his wife, Mamie Johnson, later wrote. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was peace with honor. For the people of Harlem, this meant that Bumpy had not only ended the violence, but had also stood up to the white mafia, a rare feat at the time. Bumpy Johnson, the Godfather of Harlem. With his partnership with the Mafia secured, Bumpy became the undisputed Godfather of Harlem. He controlled almost everything that happened in the neighborhood's criminal world, from numbers rackets to protection schemes. Bumpy had a hand in all illegal activities. If anyone wanted to start a new venture, whether it was a number spot or a speakeasy, they needed to get Bumpy's approval first. If they didn't, the consequences were brutal. One of Bumpy's most infamous acts of violence was against a rival named Ulysses Rollins. During one street fight, Bumpy stabbed Rollins 36 times. On another occasion, Bumpy attacked Rollins in a restaurant, leaving him so badly injured that his eyeball was hanging from its socket. Afterward, Bumpy nonchalantly declared that he had a craving for spaghetti and meatballs. Stories like these contributed to Bumpy's fearsome reputation. A complex legacy. Robin Hood or ruthless gangster. While Bumpy was undoubtedly a ruthless crime boss, he was also known for his softer side. Many in Harlem saw him as a kind of Robin Hood figure. He used his wealth and power to help the less fortunate in the community, giving out food, paying for people's rent, and making sure that Harlem's poor didn't go without. He was especially generous during Thanksgiving and Christmas, when he would give away turkeys and host parties for the community. This dual nature made him both feared and beloved in Harlem. Bumpy was also a man of culture. He loved poetry and even had some of his work published in Harlem's magazines. He mingled with celebrities and historical figures, including Malcolm X, jazz singer Billie Holiday, and boxer Sugar Ray Robinson. He was a fashionable man who enjoyed the finer things in life, and this made him stand out from the typical gangster stereotype. As Harlem drug kingpin Frank Lucas once said, he was more like a businessman with a legitimate career than a criminal. Prison time and the infamous Alcatraz escape. Despite his success, Bumpy Johnson's criminal activities eventually led to his downfall. In 1951, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for selling heroin, a major setback in his rise as a powerful figure in Harlem. He was sent to Alcatraz, the infamous island prison known for housing the most dangerous criminals of the time. Bumpy spent 8 years there, and during his sentence, he became part of a significant chapter in the prison's history. On June 11, 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, made headlines by successfully escaping from Alcatraz, one of the most famous prison breaks in U.S. history. Although the men were never found, and their fate remains a mystery, rumors swirled about Bumpy's possible involvement. Some speculated that he had used his criminal influence to help arrange their escape, though there has never been any solid evidence to confirm these claims. Returned to Harlem in final years, Bumpy Johnson was released from prison in 1963 and returned to Harlem. Although he still had respect in the neighborhood, Harlem had changed during his time away. The area was now ravaged by drugs, much of which had been brought in by the same Mafia with whom Bumpy had once made deals. Harlem was no longer the vibrant community it once was, and Bumpy's influence had waned. During this time, Bumpy reconnected with his old friend Malcolm X. Malcolm, now a powerful civil rights leader, was facing threats from the Nation of Islam after splitting from the group. Malcolm asked Bumpy for protection, but later decided to distance himself from his criminal past and asked Bumpy to stand down. Tragically, Malcolm X was assassinated just weeks later. Bumpy Johnson's death and legacy. Bumpy Johnson's death on July 7, 1968, was not the result of the violence that defined much of his life, but from natural causes. He suffered a heart attack while dining at Wells Restaurant in Harlem, a popular spot where he was surrounded by friends. His peaceful passing was noted by his wife, Mamie, who later said it was the kind of quiet death that any Harlem sporting man would wish for. Johnson's funeral drew thousands of mourners, a testament to the deep impact he had on the Harlem community. Despite his reputation as a notorious crime boss, many in the neighborhood viewed him as a protector and a leader who looked out for the people of Harlem. His larger-than-life persona, filled with violence and power, was counterbalanced by the respect he earned from those he helped in the community. Though Bumpy's influence in the criminal underworld waned after his death, his legacy as the Godfather of Harlem endures. He remains a prominent figure in the history of Harlem, remembered for both his criminal endeavors and the role he played in the fabric of the neighborhood, which has kept his story alive for generations. Bumpy Johnson in popular culture. In recent years, Bumpy Johnson's story has reached a wider audience through movies and television. Actor Lawrence Fishburne portrayed a character based on Bumpy in the 1984 film The Cotton Club and later played Bumpy himself in the 1997 movie Hoodlum. More recently, Bumpy's life was dramatized in the TV series Godfather of Harlem, starring Forrest Whitaker as the infamous crime boss. Despite being overshadowed by other gangsters in American history, Bumpy Johnson's story is finally getting the recognition it deserves. He was a complex man, both a ruthless criminal and a beloved community figure. His life represents the contradictions of Harlem itself, a place of both struggle and triumph. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment for more videos on Underworld Icons. Let us know in the comments which Underworld Icons we should do our next videos on.